Well, there was a time when the people of God thought that their dream was over because their dreamer had died. The person who was in charge, the person who was the source of their confidence. They had a leader named Moses, and he had died, and it felt like everything had fallen apart in that moment because it was Moses that gave them the dream to go to this new land of promise where they could have this place, their own, this place of rest. And even when they were frustrated with him, even when they were angry with him, even at times when they wanted to kill him, and that's actually part of the story, they still could not deny the fact that he had this face-to-face kind of relationship with God that they did not. He was able to hear God's voice. He was able to communicate that. They could hear the thunder, and then he would actually heard the voice of God. He would go up on the mountains, and they saw the cloud descending, but he was the one that came back and said, "This is what God has given us." And he gave them the laws, the tablets. He would go into a tent and he would meet with God. He would come out, his face would glow. So they couldn't deny any of that. So their confidence, for the most part, in being able to fulfill the dream that God had for them, this dream of rest, landed on Moses and his life and who he was and his relationship that he had with God that was unlike anything they had. So when he died, it felt like the dream died as well, but instead, God spoke to Moses, as they understood that he did, and told Moses to tell the people, the dream is not over. We're transitioning. We're going to have a new leader. His name's going to be Joshua. And just as I was with you, I'm going to be with Joshua. Tell the people that. So Moses did. There was a baton passed. We looked at that last week as we started this series in Joshua called Dream On. And we began the first 9 verses and took a look at that passing of the baton from Moses to Joshua. But now the confidence the people had was not placed in a leader, it was actually placed in the words of God. God told Joshua, and Joshua told the people that their success was going to hinge on their willingness to listen to and to follow the words of God. It wasn't about a person, it was about what he was saying and what he had said up until that point. So the people, they renewed their commitment to the words of God in the presence of everyone. They said, moving forward, what you do, we will do. Where you tell us to go, we will go. Just as we followed Moses, we will follow you, Joshua, because ultimately we're trusting you to follow the words of God. So it's new. And many of you, in a way, renewed your commitment to the words of God last week. You signed up and you've begun reading all throughout this week the words of God through Joshua. We began in the book of Numbers, but then got into the book of Joshua. So if that was your very first time committing yourself to 7 days reading God's word, I'm not going to say attaboy or attagirl, but that's pretty cool. And so I'm glad that you're a part of this, and I hope you'll continue on. We're going to get through the entire book of Joshua, the whole story, in 21 days. We'll do it again, so you will have gone through it twice by the time we get finished with this series. But now we're going to pick up where we left off last week, and so we're in chapter 1, verse 10. The people have renewed their commitment to God, and in Joshua chapter 1, verse 10, Joshua then ordered the people, he said this, he ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. So after years and tears, the time had finally come for them to enter this promised land, this place where they could rest and have their own spot, their own identity, and be free. They had wandered around for 40 years on the east side of the Jordan River. And they're there hanging out and waiting until the time they could go into the promised land. And because of their disobedience, they had not been able to go. And now the time had finally come. So celebration was going on through the camp. People were pumped up. I don't think they had invented high fives or pounds or anything back then, but they were excited. And whatever Hebrew is for let's go, like that word was out there. All that, like, let's do this. Let's go. Let's see what God is going to do. It's finally here. They had experienced blessings and plagues. They had gone through hundreds of weddings and thousands of funerals. They had walked, they had wandered, they had everything. They had experienced it all. And now the time had come for them to finally go into the promised land. Everybody's excited. Then there's a but. In verse 12, Joshua continued and said, but to the Reubenites, that meaning the family of Reuben, his descendants, the Gadites, the descendants of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh, the family and tribe, you get the picture here. Those are the 3 family names. To those people, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you after he said, the Lord your God will give you rest by giving you this land. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan, but all your fighting men, ready for battle, must cross over ahead of your fellow Israelites. You are to help them until the Lord gives them rest, as he had done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan toward the sunrise. So what is going on? The two questions that if you're tracking with me, you ought to be asking. If you're not tracking with me, the fault might be the presenter, so my bad. But if you're able to understand what I just read, there are two questions you ought to be asking. One, how could Joshua have the nerve in that moment when God has said, take the promised land, how could he look at people who were already in the land that ultimately they were going to and tell them that you've got to go over and you've got to be a part of this conquering, if you will, even though you're already where you're supposed to be? And then the second question is, how are they already where they're supposed to be? Like, how is that possible? I thought they were wondering what is really going on here. And to understand the context here, we have to go back just a little bit, just a little time and just a few chapters to the book of Numbers in chapter 32. Because in Numbers chapter 32, you have a few representatives, leaders of a couple of the families. There are 12 families, 12 tribes, if you will. And each of those tribes has its own section of land that they're going to ultimately occupy as part of this promised land. It wasn't just 3, 2, 1 like the Black Friday after Thanksgiving, just go find land and stick a flag in it. Like, there was more order to it. And every family had its own place. But there were a couple of families here that while they were east of the Jordan, waiting and wondering when God is going to allow them to take the promised land for 40 years, during that time, a couple of families got really comfortable where they were. Every single day, just back and forth, wandering around, pacing, living, trying to provide, doing all those things in this one area east of the Jordan. And a few of the families were like, we like this. Like, we've been in sand and dirt for over 400 years. Our family tree has. Now we're finally with green grass and the opportunity to raise our family. Like, this is kind of nice. And they got comfortable where they were, so much so that in Numbers chapter 32, verse 1, it says, the Reubenites and Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead, which is where they had been wandering around east of the Jordan, that land was suitable for livestock. So they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the community and said, and then skipping to verse 4, he said, the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel, that land is suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your eyes, they said, let this land be given to your servants as our possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan. So the Jordan River was, in many ways, a barrier. They were all east of the Jordan, and they went to Moses and said, we kind of like it over here east of the Jordan. So whenever you go and take your promised land, we're just going to stay here. Is that cool? Can we just be here? We're good. We can have a promising life in this spot. So they're making a big request to Moses to say, the thing that you guys have been waiting on, crying over, missing out, the reason, the dream that got us here, can you just go dream over there and we get to stay back? In verse 6, it says, Moses responded and said to the Gadites and Reubenites, should your fellow Israelites go to war while you sit here? Why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over into the land the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did. So he's going back to why they were wandering in the first place when, skipping a few phrases down, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land the Lord has given them. He said, this is exactly what your dads did. They were sent out to look at this promised land. They came back, and everybody except Joshua and Caleb said, oh, we can't go there. We can't take this land. The people are too big. The people are too strong. We're not going to be able to do this. As a result, they were never, ever able to go into the promised land. That's the reason we're in this problem. And now you're coming to us with the same thing, trying to do something that is ultimately going to discourage the rest of the people. Because the fear was, we're not big enough anyway. And now you're saying, let's take 3 of the families, 2.5, and that's a different story, but you got 2.5, almost 3 of the families of the 12, and you're going to stay behind and send us out undermanned. Moses said, that is not right. That is not cool. That's not part of the dream. That's not part of what we're doing here. And I know God's angry about it. He went on in verse 13 and said, the Lord's anger burned against Israel, going back to that story before, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until the whole generation of those who had done evil in his sight was gone. And here you are, a brood of sinners, standing in the place of your fathers and making the Lord even more angry with Israel. So Moses is done with Reuben's people, Gad's people, and part of Manasseh's. He said, listen, what you're doing is going against everything we have dreamed up until this point. So, of course, they were wanting to, have their way, so they came up with a compromise. And they said in chapter 16 to Moses, we would like to build pens here for our livestock and cities for our women and children. But we will arm ourselves for battle and go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them to their place. Meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has received their inheritance. So their perspective was, okay, how about we do this? Our wives and kids are staying behind. Our livestock staying behind. We're going to let them live in these homes that we've built over the last 40 years. But all of us men will go ahead and we will fight with everyone else until they have found their homes as well. So our people then will come back across the Jordan. We'll go back east where we are now, and we will live moving forward. And at this point, they have ultimately made the decision to stand with the family until everyone has found their home. And Joshua went before them and said, do you understand what you're doing? He's recalling this whole story now. But there's a part that we won't take time to look at it in Scripture, but at the end of Numbers chapter 32, Moses said, okay, we will do that, but God help you if you forget your vow, because your Lord will find out, and your sins are going to cause your downfall. So he let it be known. It was not a cool thing, but it was acceptable. That they would not only just fight with, but they would go before everyone else, and they would help them get their land. And this principle that Moses allowed to happen, that Joshua then, as we read just a moment ago, reminded them of, I believe is the foundational principle for us as a church family now and forever. And there are other verses in the Bible that I would, if I had to have one, I would lean on or cling to. I understand that maybe more than this principle. But this is the principle that explains everything. And the principle is this, that no one rests until everyone rests. That is what they were agreeing to. That was what Moses held them to. That was what Joshua reminded them of. And that was the principle that was going to allow the entire family to get to the promised land and see this through. No one rests until everyone rests. They were not able just to sit back and say, we have found a place where we're comfortable and we can rest here. So you guys deal with it. This is our spot. That was not going to be part of it. No one rests until everyone rests. And so from that point on, the rest of the book of Joshua is how this unfolded. This no one rests until everyone rests. For much of my life, Joshua has been my favorite book of the entire Bible. Early on, it was because there was so much blood and guts and gore. And that just kind of speaks to me. I just kind of am intrigued by this, I am a typical American male. And I know that, and I get it. I think Rambo is an amazing bit of cinema. Like I just, all that. Like I am overwhelmed by things that are underwhelming. I get that. But what I've come to realize is that the book of Joshua is not about blood, guts, and gore and war, even though that's intriguing at some level. and entertaining. This is about people coming together to fight for other families. This is us saying, my family is secure, but yours is not, and we will leave our rest until you find what we have found. This is the ultimate picture of people coming together saying, your needs are as important, if not more important than mine, and I'm going to fight with you. Now, if you don't know the rest of the story, you're reading through that maybe now, you'll find that they do get their land, that Joshua does succeed in the mission. However, in the book of Hebrews, which was written thousands of years later, there's a Christian man writing to people who were of the Hebrew faith prior to meeting Jesus, and he's helping them understand this. And in Hebrews chapter 4, he alludes to Joshua and this conquest. And he says in verse 8 of Hebrews chapter 4, for if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Say, wait a minute, I thought Joshua succeeded. I thought they made it in. They did. Well, what's he talking about here? And this is awesome. Although the people found their physical rest, what the writer of Hebrews was explaining was that in God's story, this was never about a plot of dirt. This taking of the promised land was just a shadow of what God was ultimately trying to show them. That there is a rest for our hearts and souls that cannot be satisfied on any plot of land. And this was a picture of what God was ultimately unfolding for all of creation. That no matter how many heads of livestock they had, no matter how much acreage they had, no matter how much square footage their home had, there was always going to be something else that's shinier. There was more gold. There was someone else who was always prettier. There was another conquest to be had. There was someone who was always stronger. There was another accolade. There's always more. It's never, ever enough. And some of you are living that life. It's never enough. Whether it's people or money or stuff, or there's always something missing. And the writer of Hebrews says, ultimately, this promise is more than just taking land. Because if Joshua had succeeded, there would have truly been no reason to move forward. And we would not have even needed Jesus if by taking land, he could have provided rest for their souls. But it didn't happen. And that's why Jesus showed up and said, all of this has been leading to this moment. And you follow me, and I will give you rest for your souls, a Sabbath rest for the people of God. And understanding that, what you and I have to come to grips with is that no one rests still until everyone rests. And some of you have met Jesus, and you have experienced that rest for your souls. And you lie in bed every night with the confidence knowing that if today was your last day, you'll immediately be ushered into God's presence, that he's taken care of you, that he's breathed life into you, that he's placed within you his own spirit, that is a deposit guaranteeing your inheritance in heaven one day. He's taking care of it all. There's nothing on earth, there's no power above or below that can separate you from the love of God that's found in Christ Jesus. You got it all. Even with all of that, no one rests until everyone rests. So even though your family is safe and you've got your little spiritual hub of protection and all your little ducks are in a row, you have a calling on your life. I wrote in my margins this week as I was just studying for this, my responsibility is to lead my home, but my calling is to lead you home. And that is not a preacher, pastor thing. That is a people thing. That ultimately my responsibility will always be to lead my home. My number one responsibility is my tribe. And my tribe consists of Queen Christy, of Princess Madison, and Prince Brock. That is my family. That's who I'm responsible. That'd make me a king. Once again, the pride thing. Let's mark that out. But anyway, my responsibility is to my wife, Christy, my daughter, Madison, and my son, Brock. Those are my people. And no matter how close I get to any other tribe, those are the ones that I'm responsible for ultimately. But I also have a calling on my life, and that is to lead you home. And to lead home every single person that's in my city or my sphere of influence. And those two things work together just fine. Just as the people of Israel said, I will always be a part of the tribe of Judah. Well, good for you. But you're also going to make sure that the rest of the family, the other 11 tribes, get home, because no one rests until everyone rests. And those restless souls that you go to school with, that you work with, that you're going to see when you pull into your driveway here in just a few moments, you're going to see them again. You're going to wave just like you always do. Those people that you pass by in the hallway tomorrow, all of those people who are not at rest because someone has not led them home. And that someone is you. It is your responsibility. It is my responsibility. My family has my heart, my city has my calling, and my God gives me my orders. That is how life is supposed to be lined up. And if I'm faithful to each of those, then everybody's going to get home. Everybody that's in my life is going to get home. And yet, so often we miss out on that because we're so comfortable where we are. It's just kind of good. Because no matter how much I mess up today, no matter how poorly I communicate truth today, I'll go home and my wife will say, that was amazing. And truthfully, she missed both services, so she won't even know. But she'll say, that was awesome. You did a great job. My son will say, proud of you, Dad. Awesome. I say, thank you. My daughter will say, I don't know what you did, but I bet it was better than any other person in the whole world. Like, that's just kind of it's all good. You know, I've got that, and I know that. I don't take it for granted. I'm so thankful I have that. No matter how badly I mess up, I've got that. I've got some people in my life, some awesome men in my life who encourage me no matter what. And if I feel like I'm just a little insecure in something, I go to them and they immediately turn around and say, what has God said? What are we doing? They talk me through that. I've got those people in my life. But my mission is not complete no matter how comfortable I'm able to make my life until everyone is home. This week I passed by a guy several times at the gym where I'm a member, and I thought several times, like, I need to ask this guy. Like, I need to get him in. I have a feeling there's some bit of faith background, but I don't know that for sure. And life has been hard at times, and we've got a kind of a cool rapport. And I thought, I need to reach out to that guy. I don't know that this is going to be the location where we have hey, do you know Jesus as your Savior? I'm not sure, but I can at least invite him to come and be a part of what's going on at church. And I thought about it over and over all week. And then Friday I saw him. I thought, well, better do it now or I've missed another week. And somebody else was talking, and I thought, okay, I'll wait till next time. And yesterday morning, he had a family member of his I don't know really well, but like we're technically friends on social media. So there was hey, would you please pray for my dad? I know y'all have got some kind of weird macho thing, friendship thing, but he thanks a lot of you, and would you please pray for him? There's some health things that are concerning to us. And I immediately just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Like, okay, I was like, I got it, God. Like, so he and the entire family are going to be here with us next week. So you guys better be on your game. But I hope that's how you feel every week, because those invites you give out, you never know. But it's just odd to me. I thought how kind we are when it comes to faith, and how we just get this burst of Southern hospitality. Well, I don't really want to make them feel like I don't want to. When every other arena of our lives, we could not care less what people are thinking. We just barge in and do stuff. Your phones right now, I'm sure, have, over the last hour, you've had someone say, hey, this political party hasn't heard from you in a while. What's really going on? And you get calls from state representatives and senators. And you like, what? We didn't ask for this. I'll go home today. I'll turn on the television that I paid for, watch streaming shows or watch networks that I'm ultimately paying for, regardless of how free they say it is. And they're bombarding me with things I don't care about, I don't believe in. No one's asking me, hey, do you mind if I tell you about my position? And they just throw it in your face. Then when it comes to faith, we're like, well, If you happen to be free from 10:30 to 11:30 and you don't know what you want to do, and if you're accidentally over by a red coat run, we're just fumbling all over it instead of just going, hey, you're going to be sitting with me next week, saving you a seat, I'll pick you up. Like, no, we don't want to do that because they might turn, we don't care about turning people off in any other time except when it comes to faith. The one thing that actually matters. Some of you men and women have been a part of rescue missions as a result of serving in the military. And I don't claim to be able to know the ins and outs, but I doubt you showed up at a place and knocked gently and put your ear up to the door and said, if anyone is in peril, you can follow me to freedom. You kick the door down, you say, come with me. Well, I don't want to come. Well, we'll talk about that later, but you're coming. You're coming. This is the mission. You're going to come. Now, I'm not encouraging you to go kick a door down today and say, come with me to church like we're doing. But I'm not saying it. I'm just saying that we are very, very, very kind when it comes to faith. And the truth is, we may not have all the time that we think we have. And no one rests until we all rest. And I believe if we as a church family ever get something else so twisted that it's more important than that, I believe there's a chance God just removes his hand and says, okay, apparently you're good on your own, doing your own mission. So go ahead, see how that works. But I believe if we commit ourselves to saying no one rests until we all rest, I believe God's hand of favor falls on that group of people. And then we get to move forward as an army of individual families who has said, I've still got my people and they're still most important to me, but together we're going to change the world. And we're going to experience that. And I believe that's the kind of place that walks in the power of God. And that's what I'm hoping as we move through this series of Joshua that we'll begin to dream and get a glimpse of for us as a church family.